Disclaimer, this video contains talk of explicit sexual misconduct that may not be suitable for all viewers. If you are uncomfortable with such topics, I recommend clicking off this video now. All legal matters discussed in this video are and have been public knowledge with several credible sources to back them up. I will link some of the sources used in the production of this video in the description below if you would like to look more into the situation. Throughout the years, Vince McMahon had managed to dodge every legal bullet sent his way. That was until a paralegal from Connecticut struck him down thanks to a Wall Street Journal article that led to his resignation from the WWE in the summer of 2022. The bullets did not stop there when an article dropped last week just before the Royal Rumble. This time, Vince was removed from all aspects of WWE's and TKO's business after more allegations against him followed. Even his WWE.com profile was Chris Benoit from history. While looking into several of McMahon's allegations for content on this channel, like the steroids trial and the alleged cover-up involving Jimmy Snuka and the murder of his girlfriend, I stumbled upon one such allegation that proved remarkable that it did not take Vince McMahon down sooner. The allegation at hand is one filled with alleged cover-ups from the FBI and so much more cloudiness attached. In 1992, the WWF, Vince McMahon, and former WWF ring announcer Mel Phillips faced federal investigation alleging sexual misconduct in the workplace at the World Wrestling Federation. The late Tom Cole and the late Pat Patterson are at the center of this scandal known as the Ring Boy Scandal. Most of this scandal is public or general knowledge within the realms of the wrestling bubble. However, I am here to uncover additional shocking details that will leave you wondering just how the WWF got away with this ugly treatment of its employees for so long. Mel Phillips, a former ring announcer for the WWF throughout the 80s and early 90s, Terry Garvin, a former professional wrestler and backstage official within the WWF, and Pat Patterson, the famous right-hand man and creative mastermind that came up with ideas like the Royal Rumble, formed a backstage faction known amongst the locker room as the Cream Team. They got this name as a spoof on the Dream Team that consisted of Brutus Beefcake and Greg Valentine, and it was a play on the trio's affinity for the same sex. Now on the surface, there's nothing wrong with that, as Patterson and Garvin were two of, if not the first openly gay active performers within wrestling. Upon further investigation, that's when things get a bit strange. Most of you watching already have some knowledge of, or have at least heard of the Ring Boy scandal. It consisted of several accusations of sexual harassment and misconduct within the WWF throughout the 1980s. The scandal came to light in 1992 when Tom Cole brought forward accounts of his dealing with Mel Phillips. He stated that sometime in 1985 or 86 that he attended a WWF show and was courted by Phillips. Phillips, who was in charge of hiring ring boys at that time. Now ring boys, they consisted of teenage boys anywhere from 13 to 19 years old that were paid a few bucks to travel with the warehouse crew and help put together the ring at different arenas across the United States. While at this show, Phillips recruited Cole to work for the WWF, which he did for several years, and was even promised that he'd be the next great ring announcer for the company by Phillips. Cole wrote a book sometime before his unfortunate passing in 2021 that was later published by his family in 2023, some months after the allegations from the paralegal had taken down Vince McMahon. In this book, titled Ringmaster, Vince McMahon and the Unmaking of America, Cole recounted how Phillips gave him his phone number and his address. Cole didn't think much about it at the time, but in hindsight found the behavior a bit concerning. Phillips had a type, according to Cole. He recruited boys that largely came from single mother or broken homes. Cole fit that mold as he had just run away from his struggling mom's home in Westchester, New York, and he was also 13 years old at the time, and happened to be searching for a fatherly figure of sorts. And he assumed he found that in Mel Phillips. He started out doing shows in Westchester or Manhattan, but soon enough found himself on the road going to Philadelphia and Baltimore with Phillips. Cole said he'd have boys with drunken mothers waiting for him at every city to be part of the ring crew. The allure of free wrestling shows and getting to meet the wrestlers was enough for Tom to shake off his friends' expression of concern for what he was into. Cole's friends were right when they said that Phillips was a weird, creepy guy, as proven by this quote from his book. Quote, years later, in a draft of a legal complaint, Tom's lawyer would claim that Phillips would frequently caress plaintiffs' feet and would rub them against his own genital area. Other ring boys would go on to say Phillips did similar things to them. The other guys would say, Tom, this guy ain't right. He's playing with my toes and putting them up against his crotch and stuff. Lee, who is Tom's brother, said, I guess Tom was willing to overlook that part as long as Phillips didn't touch anything else. Terry Garvin was Phillips' boss and ultimately had the final say over the ring crew. He allegedly invited Cole to his house one time, assuring that his wife and kids would be there. However, when Cole got there, it was just Garvin at the house. Garvin made a pass on Cole, to which he refused, and Cole was then fired from the WWF. After that incident, Cole would go to the New York Post, Phil Mushnick, and tell his story in an attempt to seek justice. It seemed that the Cole brothers were a little naive in this situation by thinking that the press would actually help them. To be honest, it just caused more problems for them. Eventually, Mushnick published his article in the New York Post, which led to more media attention for Cole. Allegedly, Geraldo Rivera threatened to bombard the Coles with press at their house if they did not appear on the Geraldo Rivera show. To avoid the trouble, they appeared on the show. The boys had not pursued any legal action, which allowed Vince McMahon to go on the defense and come up with a game plan. McMahon is as shrewd a businessman as anyone that has ever lived, so that was all he needed. His game plan included his appearance on the Phil Donahue show with other accusers, Barry Orton, the uncle of Randy Orton, and Murray Hodgson. McMahon faced the two head-on and allowed them and the audience to berate him and shake him down for answers. Barry Orton had accused Terry Garvin of making passes at him. Oddly enough, Barry Orton did not see anywhere near the levels of success that his father, brother, and nephew achieved during their tenures in WWE and other wrestling companies. Perhaps because he spoke out about his experience with misconduct? I don't know. Orton fought passionately against McMahon during this interview, and he came off like he genuinely wanted to shed a light on the sexual misconduct that was happening within the WWF at the time. A lot of the misconduct seemed to be male on male. Now, whether they were able to get away with it because of the stigma placed on males by society, or the blind eye that culture turns toward wrestling, or some other factor, is not certain. The case of Murray Hodgson is also a fascinating one. Keep in mind, these allegations made by the Ring Boys, Orton, and Hodgson all came out around the same time and received a ton of media attention. Hodgson was hired on to be a broadcaster for McMahon's short-lived bodybuilding fed, and when that died out, he was brought in to be the next voice of the WWF, and all this was done after an extraneous talent search. According to Hodgson, he was fired after he refused to sleep with Pat Patterson. Patterson allegedly referred to him as the hot new guy and made passes on him. If you go back and watch the clip of Hodgson's appearance on the Phil Donahue show, you can hear Hodgson screaming at McMahon, "I was fired because I did not sleep with your vice president." If this story was not wild enough, Roddy Piper is thrown into the mix. Not much is known about the specifics of what Piper went through. However, what I do know is this. Piper broke into the business as a young man, around maybe 15 years old, and possibly suffered something very traumatic at the hands of Pat Patterson. In 2014, Piper did a shoot interview where he talked about Patterson doing something to him and hinted at sexual misconduct. He was very uncomfortable during the interview and also spoke about how Lord Alfred Hayes once put his penis in his palm. And then he later told Vince McMahon Sr. that the WWF should stand for Worldwide Piper was uncomfortable, as I noted during the interview, and he tried to use humor and even made the host laugh, and then he told the host that what he was saying wasn't funny. It was super uneasy to watch and definitely left me with a weird feeling. Other wrestlers have talked about the Piper and Patterson situation, but no one really has any concrete evidence of any wrongdoing on Patterson's end. Now here's where things get really tricky in regard to the Ring Boy scandal. Everyone, seemingly everyone involved in the wrestling community, executives, wrestlers, media members, and fans alike, all know about this horrific scandal, but nothing was ever done about it. Jake the Snake Roberts said he knew about it for years during an episode of his podcast, The Snake Pit. Greg Valentine said he had heard about it, but that he thought it was a joke at first, like it was a rib, because Patterson and Garvin were both married. Vince McMahon even knew about it, and in 1988 he fired Mel Phillips over his creepy and weird foot fetishes and obsession with teenage boys, and he was only rehired shortly thereafter. During Linda McMahon's stint as part of President Trump's cabinet, years-old evidence came out that she had rehired Phillips under the condition that he, quote, stop chasing young boys and leave their feet alone. There are articles written by literal mainstream publications like Business Insider about Linda McMahon employing a child predator. That was not on my bingo card of life. To make matters worse, in 2021, a brilliant article about the scandal was published by Babyface vs. Heel. In the article, author David Bixenspan talked about how the FBI disregarded a videotape of Mel Phillips assaulting a young boy. That's right, the feds are in possession of video evidence that contained proof of sexual assault against a child, and chose to do nothing with it, citing that there was no sexual acts such as sodomy being portrayed on the video. In the video, which I've never seen by the way, so I don't know for sure, allegedly Phillips can be seen caressing a boy's foot and rubbing it around his crotch area, which is absolutely sick. In reality, the steroids trial came about because of the Ring Boy scandal. The feds attempted to stick Vince with the sexual misconduct charges, but for some reason they were unable to do so. Instead, they shifted their focus to the next bit of crimes against Vince. The steroids trial was well on its way to stopping Vince McMahon 30 years prior to the paralegal, until Terry Bollea saved Vince's ass with his testimony. How the transition from attempting to prosecute McMahon for sexual misconduct to sticking him for distribution of steroids came to be is a little foggy. However, there is at least some moderate evidence out there that can lead one to believe that the feds were in Vince's pocket, or at the least influenced by him to a degree. AEW's Alex Marvez, who was then a writer for the Miami Herald, wrote an article for them titled, quote, WWF Under Federal Investigation, which he detailed that the WWF was even trafficking children in and out of the country and to bordering countries surrounding the US. Len Tepper, a producer for NBC, was making a piece about the scandal and wanted to use the videotape of Phillips. However, producer Anthony Valenti blocked that from happening. WWF employee John Maloof was the one allegedly in possession of the tape and refused to send it over to NBC because they felt as if they were too desperate for it. I don't know. Something is odd here if you ask me. Maloof actually sent the tape to a private investigator that was closely associated with McMahon. The feds ultimately turned a blind eye to these allegations, similarly to how they did with the US Olympic gymnastics physician Dr. Larry Nassar. Tom Cole had testified before a grand jury that Phillips had assaulted him, and still nothing was done of the matter. The feds allegedly agreed to exchange this tape of Phillips' wrongdoing for autographs and pictures with wrestlers. Essentially, the feds looked at the matter as no big deal since Phillips was just playing with these boys' feet. Upon further research, it seemed like the feds were trying to charge Phillips for the crime and then get him to flip on McMahon so they could take him down. Now, this is just a belief. Nobody really knows for sure. Apparently, the feds even went to Phillips' house to subpoena him, but he wasn't there. So that was it. They just gave up and moved on to the steroids trial. At least that's what it looks like happened. An exchange of this tape for autographs and pictures with wrestlers, and then all of a sudden, since Phillips isn't home, they just dropped the charges? I don't know. Something is not right there. To make matters worse, Phillips essentially was erased from history, as no mention of him has ever been made on TV, and clips of him are hard to find. Very little is known about his whereabouts. Apparently he owned a wrestling promotion in Wisconsin for a number of years before he passed away in 2012. Terry Garvin was fired from the WWF along with Patterson when these allegations became public knowledge, while Phillips was suspended and subsequently casted into hiding. Patterson was rehired a short time later and worked for the WWE up until his passing and was enshrined in the Hall of Fame while being regarded as one of the most important figures in wrestling history. Patterson is beloved by his peers and fans alike, even with these allegations about him being so widely known. The wrestling world is truly a weird place, and Vince McMahon had been getting away with misconduct for years leading up to his eventful downfall. The Ring Boy scandal and surrounding sexual misconduct claims, such as those of former referee Rita Chatterton, went largely unnoticed. She was the first female referee in the WWF and came forward in 1992 along with Cole, Orton, and Hodgson, and stated that McMahon once forced himself onto her in a limo before offering her a $500,000 annual salary and magazine covers. She would be fired after turning that offer down, and her attempts to reopen the investigation 30 years later, after Vince resigned from his position as chairman of WWE, went largely ignored as well. All in all, what do you make of this scandal? What do you think happened? Did the WWF have the feds in their pocket, or was it just negligence on the part of the feds? Either way, I'm glad that now in 2024, sexual misconduct allegations are taken more seriously across the entertainment and corporate worlds. It's unfortunate that at one time they weren't taken as serious. Well, there you have it. This has been another edition of Wrestling Uncovered. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Have a great day.